With that, I would like to introduce and I would like to invite my partner Praveen to talk further about Splunk and talk further about Splunk and talk about machine data and Splunk together on AWS. Praveen?
Hi, thank you, Rahul, and thank you for a great overview of AWS and AWS services. I want to get started with an overview of Splunk, and then I'll get into how customers use Splunk, what the value of our software is, and then our different cloud solutions that will help all of you get value from your machine data. To start off with, let me give an overview of our company. We as a company were founded about 10 years ago and had our first software release in 2006. We're based in San Francisco with over 1,000 employees based worldwide. We did about $300 million of revenue last year with pretty rapid growth. Now, the growth of our business has really been fueled by our business model, which is that Splunk was one of the pioneers in this concept of the consumerization of enterprise software. We believed from the very beginning that we should empower our users to access our software for free, with the mindset that if they liked what they see, they would go ahead and eventually buy our software. So we started this free download of enterprise software in the early days of our company, and now I've expanded that to an Amazon machine image, which offers a free version of our software, as well as a Splunk Online Sandbox, which offers a 14-day free trial of our software fully hosted in the cloud. So customers don't need any infrastructure or hardware to get up and going on that. The core products of Splunk are Splunk Enterprise, Splunk Cloud, and Hunk, and I'll speak about those products throughout this presentation. Splunk Enterprise is the core software. Splunk Cloud is the software as a service version of Splunk Enterprise. Hunk is our solution that provides visualization and analytics for data that's in Hadoop, NoSQL data stores, or S3. And also, as of the last earnings announcement, we have over 7,900 customers in over 100 countries around the world. More than 2/3 of the Fortune 100 are Splunk customers, with the largest license over 100 terabytes per day. So very, very large data volumes being sent into Splunk on a daily basis from individual customers. The goal of our company is really to make machine data accessible, usable, and valuable to everyone. So let's get into actually what machine data is, and then you'll see how we are executing on our mission. So what machine data is the sum total of all of the data emitted by all of the systems that power your business. So that can be servers, it can be security devices, it can be telephony devices, it can be applications, it can be web servers, and it can also be AWS CloudTrail data, the AWS CloudTrail service that Rahul mentioned a few minutes ago. Now this is a really important data set because machine data essentially contains a categorical record of everything that goes on in your business. Every transaction, every interaction is recorded in machine data. So it essentially contains a trace and a record of everything that's going on. So if you have any issues, any application issues or operations issues, the answer to what's going on lies in your machine data. So because of that, this is really one of the absolute most valuable areas of big data. And it's also certainly one of the fastest growing areas of data. With the proliferation of digital devices and with the amount of data growing exponentially, the amount of data that organizations are seeing is growing very rapidly. And this data is characterized by a few different characteristics. One is that it's coming in tremendously high volume, like I just mentioned. The second is it's coming in at really fast velocity, meaning this machine data is coming in every second of every day. There's really no pause to it because the digital world essentially never ends. There's also a great variety in this data. As you'll see in the graphic here, servers, security devices, CloudTrail, really there's a plethora of different devices that are emitting data, and you need to be able to access data from all those devices. Also variability. The way in which these log files looks is different based on every single device that's essentially spitting out those logs. So let's get into actually what machine data itself looks like. Now at first glance, machine data truthfully looks like gobbledygook. It's something that no person could recognize or make any sense of just at first glance. So this is really where Splunk fits in. The first thing we do is apply some knowledge or information and insights as to what this log data actually is. So for example, we'll reveal that part of this data is your customer ID, another part is your order ID, another part is the time a customer spent waiting on hold. So essentially the first value add that Splunk does is actually to reveal the different pieces of this puzzle. Now, of course, the next value add, or the real value add, is not just to reveal the pieces, but it's to connect these pieces in order to be able to tell a full end-to-end story. So, an example, what you see on the slide here, there's a particular customer that tried to place an order on a website, but there was a problem in that order, and the order didn't go through. So the customer spent time waiting on hold, and then tweeted about their experience. So you'll see here through this diagram, we can connect a customer ID, try to place an order, they had a middleware error, they called up, spent 4 minutes on customer care, and then tweeted that they had a bad experience, that the device doesn't work, and they called giving up, waiting for the vendor to answer. So this is one example of one story that machine data can tell. So let's extrapolate from here and see what are all the different stories that machine data can tell. And this is really where we see all the different use cases for Splunk and the different use cases for machine data analytics. So the core use cases that customers use Splunk for is application development and app management, IT operations, and security and compliance. So what this essentially means is customers can troubleshoot errors and exceptions in their applications, in roughly 90% faster than they were able to before, because they have a system where they can search, alert, visualize what's going on in their applications. With IT operations, they can more efficiently manage and monitor their IT operations because they can have a real-time view into what's going on in their infrastructure. With security and compliance, it's a new model of security where it's not based on rigid schemas, it's not based on taking in limited amounts of data that you have connectors for. It's an open approach which makes all data security relevant. We ingest all that data and provides you the ability to flexibly search through that data for forensics and investigation analysis. We also have an application for enterprise security that provides all of the key metrics and visualizations that customers need to know about their security posture. And this is one of the most rapidly growing areas of how customers are using our product. Over 1 in 3 companies today use Splunk software for a security use case. And of course, AWS CloudTrail is a key part of that in the AWS world. Now, the emerging use cases that people are using Splunk for span across digital intelligence, business analytics, and industrial data and Internet of Things. I'll give you a few examples of this. With business analytics, Domino's Pizza uses Splunk to analyze all of the marketing and online marketing they do around their campaign to have an online website for pizza ordering. So all the coupons that they do, they're tracking through Splunk software, and they're getting the business analytics from there. With industrial data, New York Air Brake has sensors on all of their locomotives, and actually sending that sensor data into Splunk to help them monitor the efficiency of their train network, which is resulting in massive amounts of fuel savings in terms of how their trains more efficiently run and more efficiently consume fuel. So this is a set here of the different use cases people use Splunk for. Here's a picture of how it all works together. So essentially, Splunk can index any type of machine data from any location and from any volume. So for example, this data can reside on premises, it can be generated in a private cloud, it can be generated in a public cloud. So whatever type of data this is, whether it's from a database, security data, server data, from web services, it can all be ingested into the core Splunk platform. Splunk Enterprise is our self-managed software that customers can deploy and manage themselves, either on premises or in AWS. And Splunk Cloud is our software as a service version of Splunk Enterprise, where we are fully hosted in AWS, and we handle all the operational aspects of running Splunk, and you as a customer simply get to use the software. Now, once that data is ingested into Splunk, you as a customer can do anything you want with it. You can search on your data, you can monitor and alert on your data, you can report and analyze on your data, set up dashboards, and we also have a full developer platform with a rich set of APIs and SDKs, so you can build applications and integrations with our platform. Right now, we have over 600 applications on top of the core Splunk platform that our customers can take advantage of for a variety of use cases, including getting more insight into their AWS environment, as well as getting more insight into their security posture, their VMware environment, or anything else that it might be. So now let's look at what are the different cloud solutions we have that enable our customers to succeed in the cloud. And the key idea here is we enable customers to leverage AWS and leverage cloud in whatever way makes sense for them. So if you as a customer want software as a service, we have Splunk Cloud, which is our enterprise class software as a service solution. Splunk Cloud comes with a 100% uptime SLA. We built Splunk Cloud from the ground up to be enterprise ready and in partnership with AWS. And today it is the only service for machine data that is backed by a 100% uptime SLA. We also have our Splunk Online Sandbox, which is essentially a 14-day free trial of Splunk, fully hosted in the cloud. And you can get started for that right from our homepage of our website. Now, if what you prefer is to manage software yourself on AWS infrastructure as a service, and many customers do that, and that in fact is what Autodesk is doing and what Alan is going to speak about in a few minutes. So if your preference is to run software yourself on AWS, all of our software is AWS ready. So both Splunk Enterprise and Hunk can be very efficiently deployed in AWS, and you'll hear more details about that from Alan. Next, integrations. We offer a set of integrations with the AWS ecosystem. We have Amazon Machine Images, which speed up deployment of Splunk software in AWS for both Splunk Enterprise and Hunk. And just last week, we announced an integration between Hunk and Elastic MapReduce, where now Hunk is available right from the drop-down menu in the EMR console. So you can very easily add Hunk visualization on top of data that you have stored either in EMR or S3, two of the Amazon services that Rahul spoke about a few minutes earlier. And in this integration as well, Hunk is available on an hourly basis. So you can spin up Hunk, analyze data in EMR and S3 on a very low cost, low entry point basis. Lastly, we have a set of applications for the AWS ecosystem. Now, what applications do is provide a very rich and an easy view into insights into your AWS environment. So CloudTrail, for example, which Rahul spoke about and Alan will speak about, is a data stream from AWS that provides insights into user activity into your AWS account, information about your logins, your API calls, unauthorized access, changes to security groups. These are, of course, things that you want to have visibility into, and that is what our Splunk app for CloudTrail provides. We also have apps for Elastic Load Balancers to monitor the health of your Elastic load balancers in AWS, as well as an app for billing, so you can monitor your AWS spend and resource utilization. So this is a summary of the cloud solutions we have. With that being said, I'll pass it over to Alan, who will speak about how Autodesk is strengthening operations using Splunk, running Splunk in AWS, and leveraging AWS CloudTrail. So off to you, Alan.
Thanks, Praveen, and hello, everyone. I'm Alan Williams, and I'm going to be talking to you today about how we use Splunk and CloudTrail to strengthen our operations. So this is who I am. I'm an engineer at Autodesk. My background stems from network administration, sysadmin, some DBA work, most recently as in infrastructure architecture. So I kind of consider myself a bit of a generalist, but my background is definitely in infrastructure. I've been using AWS for about 6 years. The last 4 years, I've been basically getting paid for it at Autodesk. And I've been using Splunk for about 1 year. About a year ago, I basically took over management of a Splunk deployment, and that kind of coincided with Splunk's .conf in September. So I went to the conference, and that's where I really had the aha moment of Splunk and the value that it provides. So when I'm now working for Autodesk, I'm typically riding around somewhere in the Northern California area or out with my dogs. So I mentioned I work for Autodesk, and Autodesk is better known for AutoCAD, but actually we have more than 100 products in our portfolio. We're really the leader in 3D design and engineering software. And as a company, our vision is to enable our customers to imagine, design, and create a better world. And the way we're doing that is really by taking an active role in the maker movement. So later this year, we're about to release our first ever 3D printer. And we also have a number of powerful consumer-grade apps to really help you as potential hobbyists really make cool things. So I would definitely invite you to take a look at the apps that we have on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. Most of them are free. Just download them, play around with them, and make great things. So with that, I'm going to dive into the presentation. So if we go back about a year, we had a problem whereby, so actually let me take a step back. Autodesk has hundreds of accounts, AWS accounts. And if we go back a year in time, we had a problem where we had so many different accounts, but we had no way of really knowing what was going on in each of the accounts. We had no single pane of glass across all of them. So we knew which employees had access to which accounts, but we really couldn't say with certainty, what type of activity was going on. What resources were created. Were they being created by people that we trust, or were they being created by people that we had no visibility into? We had no way of validating that we were really compliant. We were following standards. Because again, this is at scale. This is hundreds of accounts. So then came, this is basically saying I had no idea what was going on. But then came Splunk and CloudTrail. And both of these technologies together really complement each other. And for the next few minutes, I'm really going to walk you through how we use them to really extract and get that visibility and address the problems that I just talked about, be able to answer those questions at least. So why Splunk? Splunk is, prior to CloudTrail, Splunk has always been our, we've had existing investments with Splunk, and Splunk at Autodesk is synonymous with logging. So anything to do with logging, no matter where that log is coming from, it could be from our products, it could be from our infrastructure endpoints, anything that needs to be logged that we need to create insights and build analytics upon, Splunk is typically our de facto standard for that. And it so happened that Splunk also released the Splunk app for AWS, which had CloudTrail support. And CloudTrail provides logs for what's, for activity that's going on in our AWS environments. So that, again, really made the, the value add between both tools really compelling. Like I said, Splunk it's a familiar technology. We've been using it for years. And another great feature of Splunk is that it allows you, so yes, it can consume data from logs, just a regular log file that's on your hard drive, but you can also point it to a RESTful endpoint like SQS and S3, and it can grab data from there as well. And the other key advantage of Splunk is that it's one tool, one platform that allows us to be able to centrally manage all these hundreds of AWS accounts from one pane of glass. So what I'm going to do now is walk you through what our architecture of plugging in CloudTrail into Splunk looks like. So I mentioned we have hundreds of accounts, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to focus on 3 for this example. One of our accounts we typically deem as our core services account. So that's really where that's where we aggregate logs from all of our other accounts. So in this case, I'm going to use the pointer. In this case, we're using, account A and account B, and, so imagine that this is, account C, and there's many other accounts. So the first step that we do is that we configure CloudTrail in each one of these linked accounts. And CloudTrail is configured essentially 8 times because there's a service that needs to be configured in each region within that account. So once we configure CloudTrail, within the CloudTrail console, you tell it where to send its logs to. It can either send its logs to a local S3 bucket within the individual linked account, or it can send it to an S3 bucket that belongs to another account. So in this case, we're sending all the CloudTrail logs to an S3 bucket in our core services account. And the next step is that we can also configure CloudTrail to send a notification to SNS whenever a log is generated. So it sends a log to S3, and then at the same time, it also creates a notification in SNS, which then creates a message in an SQS queue that has a link to that log in S3. So what this essentially does, and because we have so many different AWS accounts, we have this central queue that keeps track of all the logs that have been created by CloudTrail, and then Splunk can then read from that, so poll and then read from that SQS queue. So this really makes it a scalable architecture because, again, we can have as many accounts as we want, all the accounts sent to a central S3 bucket and a central SQS queue. And then all that Splunk has to do is just read from that one queue, and it can gather the events for all the accounts. So it's really simple to configure. Like I said, like I mentioned before, it's scalable to a large number of accounts, and it really enables that central pane of glass for viewing. So now I'm going to step into the use cases that we use CloudTrail for: incident response, operations troubleshooting, and compliance auditing. I'm going to go deeper into each one, and then also provide you some examples of how we're addressing those use cases. So for the first one, incident response, we typically have to answer these 3 questions. And these would come from our security team. So they would tell us, hey, we know of some malicious activity that happened in this certain account within this certain period of time. We need to find out what happened, what type of events occurred in that account. So then we can know if anything bad happened or if it was just normal, regular activity. Or another example is that we have a known compromised host. So we have the IP address for that host, but we want to know what has that host done within our accounts, if anything. Or another fairly common, not common to us, but common just in the industry, is that IAM keys may accidentally get published to GitHub or accidentally put in a forum, and you have no way of knowing. So you have no way of knowing where those IAM keys may have been used. So somebody may have maliciously grabbed the keys while you posted it, even if it was just for a few seconds, and then used it to get access to your account. With CloudTrail, you can see what they did, if anything. So let's take a look at that. So the first example, let's find out how. So we know we have an account that was compromised within a certain period of time, and we want to know what happened. So here I'm showing you, let me get the pointer. Here I'm showing you how I'm running that query within Splunk. So my index is called AWS CloudTrail. The source is essentially the files in S3 that belong to an AWS account. So I know which account is compromised. So let's say for this example, it's AutoCAD, right? The word AutoCAD would be in the string of the source. So here I'm saying, star AutoCAD star. So anything related to AutoCAD. And this is just an example. By the way, all this data is coming from our production environment. That's why I've had to blur out some of the information, but this is actually real data. So I'm looking for anything from the AutoCAD account, and then I'm piping that over to the stats count, and then counting how many events have occurred. So in this case, we can see all these events occurred within that period of time. And then our security team or operations team can then make a judgment call and figure out if this activity was actually malicious or not. And at the end here, you can see how many times that event occurred. So for the other example, we have the IP address, and we want to know what was done by that host. So here again, I'm also querying the AWS CloudTrail index. I'm passing it the IP address for the compromised host, and then I'm looking at how many events were generated by that host. So here we can see a number of describe events were done. And in some cases, for describe instance status, it was quite a large amount. So with describe, basically, if this were malicious, this could mean that from that host, someone was actually looking to see what instances we have, and then they could potentially take that data and do something more malicious with it, And then in the other example, we have an IAM key that was accidentally posted to GitHub, and we want to know where that key was used. So again, I'm doing a similar thing. I'm still querying the same index. I'm passing it the IAM key, and I'm asking it to tell me what sources, so essentially what AWS service, and what's the name of the event that occurred within that service. So in this example, for the SQS service, a queue was created. For the ELB service, a describe was issued. And then within EC2, another describe was issued. So here again, you make a call. Okay, does this look suspicious? And then, so, for example, in this particular example, maybe queues should not have been created. So then we can dive deeper and see why this queue was created and how. And these queries are queries on top of the underlying raw data. So because you have the raw data, you can massage this data pretty much any way you would like. So now I'm going to go over into the operations troubleshooting. And these are two very common queries that we get. We have this instance ID, and we want to know what account does it belong to. Or we just want to have an idea of where in the world are people signing into our AWS accounts from. So in this example, again, I'm querying the AWS CloudTrail index, and I'm looking for the event run instances, which means anytime an instance is created, it initiates a run instances event. And here I'm passing it the instance ID for the particular instance that I'm looking for. And in this particular example, I'm actually looking at the raw data. So the raw data is all in JSON. If I wanted, I could present this in a different way. I could present it in a table format if needed, but I just kind of wanted you to see it in different ways. So this is the actual raw data, and here we could see that this instance is in US East 1. This is when it was created, and in the very bottom here, in this section, you could see who it was created by. So here I can see the account ID. Here I can see the access ID that was used to create it, and here I can see who created it. So this is the ARN that's associated with the user who actually logged in to create this instance. So again, this is all information that before we had no way of knowing. And now that everything is logged, any change that's made within our accounts, we have that visibility. And then in this example, now I'm showing you for the sign-in that Amazon AWS.com, which is essentially the Amazon console, where are sign-ins coming in from? And in this case, I'm actually showing one of my favorite visualizations in Splunk, which is the mapping visualization. So that's this geostats function here, where I basically pass all this data to geostats. I tell it what the latitude and longitude is, and it graphs that source IP that comes from CloudTrail on top of a map. So in this case, we can see that most of our login requests are coming from the West Coast. Yellow is successful and blue is unsuccessful. So the unsuccessful could be somebody just forgot their password, or it could be somebody's just trying a bunch of passwords and trying to break into the system that way. So again, we can dive deeper into this and see if the activity looks malicious or not. But it can quickly, at a glance, we can see where we have activity coming from and if it seems malicious or not. For example, we may have if we're seeing a lot of activity coming from Brazil, but we don't have any offices in Brazil or we don't have any employees in Brazil, that could be an indicator of something bad that's happening. And then the last use case that I want to cover is compliance auditing. So in this case, we have real-time alerts from Splunk that generate anytime someone creates a security group that's wide open to the world, where the rule is 000/0, which means anyone who knows that IP address can connect to it. We don't want that type of behavior. So whenever that happens, we want to get an alert in real time and know that it's happening. Also, if we see certain events happening too frequently within a given period of time, we want to be able to generate an alert for that. For example, if we have too many SQS queues created within, let's say we have over 15 SQS queues created within a 1-minute period, that we can set a trigger on because that to us may seem as malicious activity. And also, whenever an IAM user is created, we want to be notified of it. So we don't use IAM users at AWS. We use SAML users instead. So we log in with our AD credentials into the AWS console. So in that case, so because we do that, anytime an IAM user is created, to us, it could potentially be something bad because we rarely have to create IAM users. Let's look more into that. So this screenshot is a real-time alert in Splunk. This is a query that's running. And essentially, this is looking at the CloudTrail index. It's looking at the event name, which is authorized security group ingress. So that means any inbound rules within that security group that have a rule of 000, it will then generate an alert. And that alert can be an email, or it could be a notification to ServiceNow. And then in the other example, this is when an IAM user is created. So someone creates an IAM user. Again, we automatically get an alert that it was created. And this is in near real time. So by the time, from the moment the action was done in AWS to when we receive the alert, can take anywhere from 5 to maybe 15 minutes. But within 15 minutes, we would get an alert. So in summary, I covered why CloudTrail and Splunk to us is a happy marriage. How we use both of these tools in architecture that's scalable to hundreds of accounts. And I covered some use cases and examples of each. And these two are really key tool sets for both our operations and security teams. Praveen, back to you.
Thank you very much, Alan. That was a great overview. This is Nate McCurvey, Technical Product Marketing Manager at Splunk. And I just want to point out, once I get my screen shared, that you can go and, one second. There we go. Thank you, Praveen. So I just want to point out that you can get the data yourself by going to apps.splunk.com and download the Splunk add-on for Amazon Web Services. It's completely free and fully supported by Splunk. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through an actual scenario, a demo of how to use Splunk and a typical use case. In this case, we have a scenario where a Splunk customer, this customer actually sells cell phones and cell phone plans. They use Splunk to identify a critical issue that was impacting their revenue. And actually it was identified by the sales team, and you'll get to see how that happened. But first, what kind of data are they bringing in, and what does this data look like? This customer is bringing in transactional data, they're bringing in web logs, they're even bringing in authentication data, even middleware BPM data. So let's drill down and see what this actually looks like. So here we can see the raw data in the bottom right. This is just the raw machine data that's being spit out by any machine. And notice that it's in different formats. We have web logs here, radius logs here, we may have key value pairs. It doesn't really matter what the format of the data is. Splunk's going to take this raw machine data and it's going to extract information about that data in the form of fields on the left-hand side. So for example, Splunk discovered there's a lot of status codes inside this data. So by clicking on this field, I can see what exactly those status codes are. For example, I know 200, that's a successful reach to my website, but 503, I may not be so sure. Splunk can also enrich this data. So we can see a field below called status description, where Splunk is mapping these values to human readable descriptions. So now I know that 503 actually means service unavailable. And I can go through and search my data for service unavailable. So think about how this enrichment can be used. Maybe I have a user ID in my data and I don't know what that user ID is, but I know a user name. I could actually search my data for the user Bob Smith, and it's going to bring up raw data that may have user ID 5678. It can map that user name to an ID, and I can see exactly what Bob Smith did across all of my infrastructure. Up at the top, Splunk's providing a timeline of when these events occurred. And above that is a simple search interface, a lot like a Google interface, where I could search for anything such as error or failure. We can also build dashboards and reports. So let's say, for example, I want to build a dashboard on the status codes of my web infrastructure. I can simply click top values. Splunk will give me a visualization. I can choose a more pertinent one, such as maybe a pie chart in this example, and save this as a dashboard. So you can imagine how you can continue to create reports and you can add them to dashboards, and then what you'll be left with is a dashboard like this. This dashboard was created by the sales team, and they wanted real-time insight into how these cell phone plans were selling by analyzing this raw machine data on the back end. So we can see, for example, their real-time revenue per phone and that it's up. We can see where people are actually purchasing devices and phone plans and what those phones may be, how frequently, etc. You may have noticed up in the top left that our activations in the last hour are actually down significantly, 32%. Something bad is probably going on. And if we look at a timeline, we can see that there might have been an issue right here. So let's zoom in. Sure enough, the number of sales dropped significantly. It actually looks like it went down to 0. And this green line is actually a prediction that Splunk is doing, saying, hey, this is where the sales are predicted to be. This is where they should be. So since we're outside the bounds of prediction, we know something's going on, and we want to drill deeper. And since we have that raw machine data, we can ask new questions. So I'm going to click on this, and it's going to take us to another dashboard, which is, again, in the back end, these are just Splunk searches like you saw in the beginning. So I can see, for example, that my SLA infractions and my failed transactions are pretty high. And if I look at my transaction volume over time, this is, for example, how many sales I've been having, I can see there was a significant dip. And I want to know what caused that. I'll just click and Splunk will add more context to this situation. So now I'm looking at the things that provide this end service. So that involves a web server, an app server, and a database server. And if your sales drop to 0, it's probably a technical issue, and high-ups are involved. So you will have to get this issue resolved very quickly. This would usually constitute a war room scenario where you get the web server guy in a room, the app server person, and the database administrator, and they all point fingers at each other. Let's see if we can avoid that situation, drill down deeper, and see what's going on. It looks like our web server was providing generally good results. Let's click and see what those actual status codes were. The majority of them were okay responses. The database, though, that's kind of looking a little bit high. Let's click and drill down here. Here I can see that I have a high amount of concurrency. I would love to actually see what queries were running in my database and see if they could be a cause. And since we have that machine data from any source, we can do that. I'll click, and what Splunk has done is it's brought up a visualization of how long the database was taking to make these transactions or these queries. And there's a really high one here. This particular query, it looks like, took over 35 seconds to run. That's really, really bad when the average should be less than 200 milliseconds. And we can see in this table what the exact command was. And it looks like this is the culprit. It's an inner join, probably something written by the intern. And now we know how to resolve this issue, and we don't have to get that war room together of people pointing fingers. And all this, again, is just by creating simple searches on the raw machine data. We can even analyze what the response was during that particular time frame. So for example, I know the issue happened here. Let's zoom in to this time range. And Splunk's going to update my other panels and tell me exactly what was going on. So I can see that during that time range, actually most of my responses were totally unavailable. And that's why our sales dropped to 0. There's also another way to create searches inside of Splunk. It's a newer feature that we introduced, and it's called Pivot. And it allows users to create searches without, or analyze data without having to write searches like in that Google-like type interface. So here I'm looking at the data available to this telco. I can analyze things like sales. So let's go ahead and click on sales. And now I can see the total number of sales over whatever time frame I want. So I can choose the last hour, for example. I've had 664 sales. So what if I wanted to know by the type of phone or platform, maybe Android versus iPhone? I simply select phone type, and now I can see the real numbers without having to write any search. I can add more rows or columns, such as maybe I want to know if they're prepaid or postpaid plans. And I can see that as well. It's completely drag and drop, so I can make plan type into a column. And that's an easier way to see it. But visually, I might want to create a report off of this, and I can do that as well, simply by clicking the visualization I want on the left-hand side, set it up however I want, like stacking it, and save it as a dashboard for the future. So this is a really quick overview of how you can take any machine data and get insight out of it, analyze the data, and create reports. And with that, I will pass it back to Praveen.
Okay, let me get back to the WebEx here, or the Adobe Connect. Where are we? Okay, thank you, Nate, for the great presentation. So just jumping back, it's very easy to get started. With Splunk, just pop onto our website. You'll see the green button on the top right that says Free Splunk. Just click there, and you'll be taken to a menu of options where you'll be able to get started with a free download of Splunk Enterprise if that's what you want, or our free online sandbox for Splunk Cloud, which is a fully cloud-hosted free trial of our software. You can also get started with Hunk from here as well. These are all free options for you to get started with Splunk software. So that being said, that concludes our presentation. Thank you all so much for your time today.